Alright, so the aim of this video is how do ecosystems constantly recycle molecules? So in this picture here, I drew a tree, and then the tree can die, or like the deer eats the tree and the tree dies. And then you see that when the deer eats, it makes poop, and then the poop goes into the ground, and then the worms eat the poop, and the worms themselves poop, right? And so how do these molecules recycle? How does it go from the poop to the worm, and the worm poops out its poop into the ground? Where do these molecules go? So the context is things are made of molecules, right? All living things eventually die. So how can we reuse the molecules that are inside of these living things? And how does the entire environment reuse molecules? And here's an example of reusing molecules, right? So we talked before about photosynthesis, where you make oxygen, and then here's you breathing in oxygen, and then you breathe out carbon dioxide because you do cellular respiration, right? You're not able to do photosynthesis. At the end of this video, there's 7 questions to answer to check that you really understood the material. Okay, so first we're going to talk about what decay is. So decay is when, for example, like you bite an apple. If you leave the apple by itself, over time, the apple is going to get smaller and smaller because water is going to evaporate out. And also, there's going to be bacteria and other things that are eating the apple. And that's decay. You can watch the other YouTube video to see videos of decay. Decomposers are things that eat anything that's dead. So the apple, it was alive before when the apple was on the apple tree. And then when you take a bite out of the apple, bacteria are also going to eat the apple, even though you're not eating the apple anymore. Even if you don't bite the apple, bacteria are in the air and they can slowly eat the apple as well. What other decomposers are there that eat anything that dies? There's also worms, and there's also fungi. Okay, so right now you can pause this video, and there's 2 quick questions. First quick question is, are decomposers autotrophs or heterotrophs, and why? And the second quick question is, what kind of molecules are important to being able to survive and maintain homeostasis? So think of at least 3 and at least 1 organic molecule. Okay, so when you're done, I'm going to go over the answer now. So the first question, decomposers, they eat anything that's dead. So they are heterotrophs. Decomposers are heterotrophs because they have to eat. Second question, what kind of molecules? So there's a lot of molecules that you can say. So for example, you can say any of the 4 organic molecules, right? Apple contains carbohydrates, which break down into sugar, right? You can talk about protein that builds the traits, which break down into amino acids. Lipids is storage of sugar, right? DNA is the instructions. That's how the apple looks like an apple, right? So any of the 4 organic molecules are important to survival. Can you also say water? Yeah, water can also help you remove waste, right? You can also talk about carbon dioxide. That's a waste product, but it's also needed for photosynthesis. Okay, so those are the 2 quick questions there. The next vocabulary words here is fungi. So fungi is it's a category that mushroom belong to. And if you didn't know, mushroom are actually decomposers. Mushroom actually do not do photosynthesis. They actually eat dead things. So usually you see mushrooms, they're on trees and other dead things. How do mushroom or fungi reproduce? They do a process called budding, where it grows a bunch of cells out. And so you see that there's like a small mushroom that grows out of this bigger mushroom, and that's called budding. And so that's how fungus reproduce. And the mushrooms, they grow together not because they're friends. They grow together because when it grows out large enough, it's going to drop off and then it'll become another mushroom. So let's go ahead and pause again, and let's go ahead and answer question 3. So question 3 is, what 2 processes produce the same DNA in each of the cells? Okay, so when you're done pausing and answering the question, let's go over it. So this process where the budding happens, the DNA is exactly the same because there's only 1 parent. So what kind of process do bacteria do to have the same DNA in every cell? they do asexual reproduction. And then how about for your cells? Like when you get a cut or when you're growing, how do you make more cells that are exactly the same? That process is called mitosis. Okay, so let's move on with the sheet. In the sheet, the next definitions that we're going to go through is 5 and 6. So ecological succession. Ecological succession is talking about how an area can slowly grow life. If you think about it, at some point in time, an area had to be empty. Like there must have just been like rocks and dirt there, right? Like imagine if like a volcano exploded or there was an earthquake. So now there must be some area that's just empty. So how does it grow life? That process is called ecological succession. And so the way that life starts to grow is that maybe there's some seeds or some autotrophs that come over to the environment. And when they land, they start to do photosynthesis. Autotrophs have to be first in ecological succession because autotrophs are the only ones that can do photosynthesis to make their own food. And so the first things to grow in ecological succession are usually the grass and the weeds. Why are they usually first to grow? They're one of the fastest things to grow. The next things to grow would be like some shrubs and then maybe like a tiny tree. And at the very end, after taking many, many years, you might finally see some big trees there because it takes a long time for a tree to slowly grow. And so ecological succession is talking about this process of an environment slowly growing more and more life. Now, you might be wondering, Mrs. Su, how come more life can occur throughout ecological succession? Well, decomposers are eating the dead things, releasing those molecules back into the environment, and those molecules can then be used for other things to grow. When autotrophs are there, now consumers can come in and eat them, right? So maybe we can add in, now that there's some grass and tiny tree, maybe we could add like a little rabbit that comes to eat the food. Right? Consumer. And so Climax Community is just referring to the most stable part of ecological succession. Climax Community is when there's not much change to the environment because it's very stable. The things have been growing there for a long time, and there's not much changes because the food supply is secure and there's no natural disaster that's happening. Of course, a natural disaster can interrupt the climax community and this whole process can start again. Okay, so if you're done listening to this video, there's 7 questions for you to answer, and that'll help you check if you understood the material.